just want to talk about how ties, like neckties, are like the most ridiculous things ever. And yet we encourage people to wear them to this day. And I don't really understand why we still put an emphasis that you look so much better if you're wearing a necktie. And to me, it just seems so bizarre of a phenomenon. Wearing a necktie and even that little handkerchief that you put into, this is probably really sort of a male discussion, but this is my experience of how ridiculous this is, and it goes to tell you on how much we have institutionalized things, symbols in this world that really do not serve a purpose in any sort of way. Um, and there's so many things that are like this in this world, but it's like the quintessential symbol of institutionalism, where we do things because we do actions, practices, because that's just the way we've always done them. And there's really no technical value, technical reason behind why we actually do those things. And neckties is my perfect example of that. There's really nothing that it serves a purpose for other than the symbol of, I guess, power, success, of you got your act together, of that you're an important person. That sort of symbolism behind it is the only reason why you put on a necktie, maybe a respect for other people. But there's no technical reason, there's no technical value behind actually doing those particular things. And there's a lot of different actions in this world that we do that have no purpose, zero purpose. And yet we do it because that's the right thing to do, or that's the thing that we do, simply because that's what we were told to do. And if we don't do that, we're being disrespectful uh, to others, maybe to yourself, whatever, how you might view it. And I think it's such an unusual thing. I tend to avoid using neckties, um, because not only it doesn't serve a purpose, but it actually is, restricting the blood flow in your neck, in your head, which is actually not healthy for you. Which is, I think, that's what I heard the original purpose of that is at one point, back in, I don't know when it came about, but, back when it originally came about, is we thought like, a rosy face is symbolism of health and prosperity, which is like far from the truth, right? Usually means that you're having heart disease. Um, but if you have this sort of rosy face, that means that you're healthy. And so, you tie up your necktie as tight as you can go, so your face would turn red. And like, how ridiculous is that, right? Now we carry this tradition, this thing forward because we think it's important, to show respect and prosperity. There's a lot of things that are like that. White bread back in the day, Wonder Bread, and I'm not trying to throw them Wonder, the bread company under the bus, but that was a symbol of prosperity. It was poor people that had homemade bread. It was poor people that had non-white bread, and became symbolic in the 1950s and 60s of wealth and prosperity if you can afford Wonder Bread. And then it's evolved since then in the last, say, 15 years, probably since the mid 1990s. I would say probably the 2000s when it started to really change, um, where white bread is considered like, oh man, it's below us sort of thing, and now it's the elite, the bourgeoisie, that is having the wholesome, hard, grainy bread. They're the ones that know better, that have that kind of bread sort of thing, right? Because we associate it with health and all that kind of stuff, but it's sort of this bourgeois sort of thing, and it's only the poor people that eat Wonder Bread now. But you can sort of see how this stuff happens. Is that there's a lot of things that become institutionalized that really don't have a lot of value, and yet it becomes parts of culture. and we continue to sort of persist with those things, even though it makes no sense. I'm wearing a sport coat right now, and I live in Florida. Like, how nuts is that? And yet I'm going to be teaching later on today. And so I'm doing something to sort of show some, it's being symbolic. If I was to come in a pair of jogging pants and a t-shirt, which is, it's something is more acceptable than it would have been 30 years ago. I don't think I've ever seen professors do that in my day, but it wouldn't be strange. I think people would think it was strange when it happened, but it wouldn't be like, this person's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? And there's lots of things like that in this world. We do it simply because that's just what we are supposed to do. And we have to acknowledge that, things are changing, especially with a lot of these social norms that we have that demonstrate things that are proper. They're very much changing. And the fact that I don't wear a necktie and teaching at a business school would be unheard of. 20 to 30 years ago, that would be considered a big faux pas, but I never wear a necktie. Um, all of these things are changing, and we have to recognize that it's just a social norm. There's no reason, rhyme or reason for these things. And, I, if it was my way, one of these things, so there's a class that gets taught in business schools, one of the ones that's sort of popular in my school, is business communication. And I think that there's a component of, I think it's business communication. There's another course, I can't remember what it is, like general business environment. They teach about it's important to wear, a sport coat and all those kind of things. But, I think a component of it is we really need to teach that these things are changing and we have to be acceptable to the norms that we're currently in. And we have to recognize that if it was me, I would sort of teach that, don't pick your nose. It's disgusting. That serves a purpose. But the things that are kind of non-essential, it's okay to sort of question them and do your thing in the environment that you're in and be part of that particular environment. I think that's a healthy thing to do, and it's an important thing to do, to be always sort of questioning those things. And is it going to prevent you from getting a date with somebody if you wear jogging pants to school? Yeah, it probably will. So you might want to consider that. But for some jobs, it's totally fine, and you have to sort of recognize that. And that's my point is sort of push back on things that are just, you do it just because, and think about, does this serve a purpose? Is there value here? What does that mean? And if you think that sort of, the cost of it is justify the means of you actually doing this thing, or justify you actually doing this thing, then by all means do it. But don't do it just because it's what everybody else does. Because there's a lot of things in this world that will likely change in the next 20 years that we can say, hey, you know what, this is totally acceptable to do these things. And we can be okay with it. Like, an example is bringing your kids to work. I could see that very much changing in the years to come, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, where we were used to sort of seeing a home life. And I could see that becoming more and more acceptable as we go through and we live life. So that's all I wanted to say. And hopefully you enjoyed this. And have a good, wonderful day. Leave some comments if you want to. I do appreciate it. Take care. And we'll see you on the next podcast.